I feel like my love for CCA and my love for our students in this community had to exceed what I personally enjoyed doing every day. So instead of doing what I loved, I kind of found a way to love what I do.
Yo, this is Streetwise. I'm your host, Matthew McReynolds, and today we have a special guest, Miss Kristi Lichtenberg, the Executive Director from Cornerstone Crossroads Academy. Miss Kristi, thanks for joining. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you, Matthew?
Oh, that's awesome. Good. Thank you so much. I wanted to bring you on because Cornerstone Crossroads Academy holds a very special place in my heart. And when I talk about my passion and why I do what I do, Cornerstone was such a special place for me. And you are such a special place for Cornerstone and for the community of South Dallas. And so I'm curious, if you could give us maybe a brief or not so brief, doesn't matter to me, background on who you are, what you do currently, and how you got started on this path.
Well, I'm Kristi, and I currently am the Executive Director of Cornerstone Crossroads Academy. I would say that I am the beneficiary of second chances. And so I was on a certain pathway with my life, walking with the Lord, looking forward to a ministry opportunity as a career, and really just when a few things went wrong in my life in my mid-20s, I just took a hard turn left and walked away from everything and everyone that I had walked with before. And during that time, just made many decisions that affected the rest of my life. As I look back now, I see that was an important time of God kind of letting me see who I really was and also know who He really is. And so prior to that, I had never really considered education or being a teacher or anything like that. But at some point during that time, I started substitute teaching, and I just really realized how much work it was and didn't really want to do that for a job. But later on, I was working at an easier job, and I thought, this doesn't feel very purposeful, or I don't know if I'm really making a difference. And so I started thinking about the classroom again and decided to go back and get alternative certification and started teaching. And it was really during that first year of teaching that God just restored my hope and belief that I could do something to serve others and be just purposeful and live on a mission with my life in spite of at that point, just not just mistakes, but just like stupid things that I had done, and that my life could still have purpose. And so I started teaching in elementary bilingual for the first 5 years, and then I went into administration after that. All of this was in Garland ISD, and kind of moved from job to job. I really liked learning different things, but like to kind of like figure something out and move on to another thing. And so I moved from different bilingual classrooms at different campuses, and then in central office in the bilingual ESL department, in the research department. And then my last job in Garland was working at a big middle school as an assistant principal. And it was during that time that I realized that there were 27 kids in our school of 1,000 middle school students who were responsible for 85% of our office referrals. And those were by far my favorite kids in the building. They're the ones that I bonded with and spent time with. I would take them to summer camp with Young Life, or, just do any kind of thing I could to connect with them. And I just thought, what is it that they're not getting that all the other students are pretty much getting great experiences here? They're learning, they're preparing for the next grade level, they're preparing for the future, but this small group is not getting something, and what is it? So during that time, I just started thinking and praying about what would it look like to have kind of like an alternative school, but an alternative model that would be a small family-like atmosphere that maybe would have some of the feeling of Young Life Camp, where people could really just experience the lavish love of God and be around people who just believed in them and encouraged them even when maybe they didn't believe in themselves. and really to just extend the same kind of second chances to kids that God had extended to me and just restored me and given me hope for the future. During that time, I met Jim and Jane Beckett, who had started Cornerstone Crossroads Academy when they were 80 years old with no background in education.
Wow.
And I had been praying to start a school and had been working toward that for several years and just kind of hitting walls at every turn. And they had been praying for God to bring an educator. We met one day, and the next day we just started dreaming about what it would be like to work together. And then over the next couple of months, just really prayed and walked through the decision with several people kind of speaking into that. It seemed like a crazy move for someone who had been kind of going up the ladder, so to speak, to kind of take a turn toward the nonprofit world, to go from, trying to kind of grow, I guess, professionally and influentially, maybe in the district, to go from a big giant school with an opportunity for growth to a tiny one room schoolhouse with 25 students seemed crazy to some people. But to me, it was just exactly what I'd been praying for and longing for. And even some of those 27 students that I had worked with in Garland, one of them in particular ended up coming and enrolling in Cornerstone Crossroads
Wow.
Academy and ended up finishing there, and to this day is a close friend. And so it's just been kind of a dream come true for me to get to work with older kids who want a second chance, who want to do something different, but really just need a small family like atmosphere to thrive in.
Oh my gosh, that is such an amazing story and such a journey and a testament to what God can do in our toughest and lowest moments. I want to get into the school, but I want to just kind of pick at you a little bit more in your story because I'm curious. When did you identify as an educator? So you didn't start that way. You started substitute teaching, and I'm sure in the beginning there had to be a sense of this is a job. I'm curious what got you to substitute teach in the first place, and when did you experience that transition to like this is a part of my identity now?
And I think sometimes the Lord just like lets us be hungry so that we have to go
Yeah.
looking for food, and then we find this huge blessing that he wanted to give us all along. I when I was growing up, I'd always tell people like, I think I know what I want to be, I'm pretty sure, but one thing I know for sure is I never want to be a teacher. And I would avoid
Uh-oh.
any college classes or any kind of things that had to do with school because I just thought like, ugh, it's boring. I don't know. It just seemed too structured. There were so many things about it that I didn't enjoy. And honestly, I was working at the Buckner Children's Home as a house parent, but I was trying to get hired to be a 911 dispatcher. But the background process took about 6 months, and so during that time, I just needed part-time work that I could do, but that wouldn't be like a long-term commitment. And so I was substitute teaching, and I was also working at the juvenile justice system, just doing like fill-in shift work for people when they were take a day off or go on vacation or something. And so between those two jobs, I could just help kind of pay the bills. So substitute teaching was crazy because one day I might be like in a bilingual pre-K class, and the next day I might be in senior English. It was just like anything
Yeah.
and everything. So I got to experience all different campuses and groups. And at that point, that was the time when I was really thinking like, wow, who would actually do this for a job? It's so much work. And even after I worked for 911 for a while, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. But after a while, I just realized like every interaction that I'm having is just for a few minutes. And there's no way to like follow up and see how people are doing afterwards and just build relationships. And I'm very much a relationship person. I also like just like the random emergency type things. So that kind of spoke to that part of me. But I remember there was one situation where someone had called 911, and I was on the phone with her after she had heard like a gunshot, and she was worried about her husband. So we stayed on the phone until the police got there, and just being with her in those moments just felt like kind of walking through the valley of the shadow of death with someone. But afterwards, it's like, the police got there, she hung up the phone, and there was never any contact with her afterwards. So that was really hard to do, just over and over and over. And so I started thinking, like, as hard as teaching would be, at least I would get to be with the same group of kids every day for a whole school year. And so there would be a chance to really build relationships with them and their families, and, just get to know people at a level where you can know them for a lifetime. So that's what really drew me to it. But even still, I still kind of resist the whole teacher thing, because I don't think that, like, my spiritual gift is not teaching. I don't think I'm an amazing teacher. I was able to build relationships with my students, which overcame a lot of my weaknesses when it comes to just like clear communication or organization or some of the other things that were harder for me to grow in.
Wow. Oh, thank you for that answer. That was amazing. I don't necessarily, I guess the terminology, I hope I used the correct word earlier, but what I meant to say if I didn't was educator. I see you as such a solid educator, because there's definitely a difference between being a teacher in the classroom 100% of your time versus the admin side of running and operating a school, and then being in a leadership position to add to that. So there's definitely a lot of intricacies and levels to the game that you've kind of been through. And I think this is the best opportunity I'm going to get to just kind of any humility you're going to throw at us today. I just want to shoot that out. I should be calling you Dr. Lichtenberg. Is that correct?
Education is just really a tool that you use like any other tool. And I'm grateful that God gave me an opportunity to get, a doctorate in education and, get that higher education. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. And so
Wow.
many after me have graduated and way exceeded, anything I've done. But I never thought of myself as like a big academician or like a super smart person or something. But one of my top 5 strengths on the Strengths Finder is learner. I love to learn
Nice.
stuff. And so just getting to be relator and learner are in 2 of my top 5. And so getting to be in school and getting to know classmates and teachers and learn new content has always been almost like a hobby for me. So
Mm.
and it's also a hobby that ends up with tools that you can use to serve others. So,
Yeah, no, that's great. There's a whole concept of, and you could probably say it better than I can, but when you're a student and when you're learning something, the best way to become a master of the topic that you're learning is to then turn around and teach it to somebody else. And so in
yes.
order to really maximize your learning, you kind of have to be an educator. And I talk a lot about the process of always being a mentee, but also a mentor, and just having that cyclical process at all times. And so I feel like you've really got that down. But that leads me to my real point in maximizing potential. I mean, here you were, you started out subbing and then realized, like, man, I need to be able to develop consistent relationships in order to feel like there's a purpose. And now you've built yourself, not just in the school, Cornerstone Crossroads Academy, but in the community. You have your PhD, and you're working on some other stuff too in educating yourself. Can you kind of break that down and why you're doing that?
An opportunity came up for me to move into the neighborhood close to the Phyllis Wheatley School, which we might talk about in a little bit, but a 100-year-old, amazing, historic school building that Dallas ISD sold to us a few years ago, and it's right by the state fair. If I look out my window, I can see the Ferris wheel from here. I can walk over to the state fair um, anytime. It's that close. But also, if I look out my other window, then I can see just about 3 blocks away the Phyllis Wheatley School that we're restoring. And so as I moved here, I was really thinking that I was moving here to just be close by during the construction phase so that I could just hop over to the campus whenever I needed to, or just be available if something happened, or, I just needed to be here quickly. And so once I got here, I started getting to know my neighbors, and the people I purchased my house from, they had really gotten to know the neighbors. So that set a great groundwork for me to go and get to know them and build on the relationships that were already started. And I started to realize that there are a lot of needs in this neighborhood, and there are also a lot of programs and opportunities in our city, but many times there's a gap between the needs and the resources. And that gap is oftentimes associated with like legal documents or paperwork that's needed. And like sometimes my neighbors would come over and ask me to email a document somewhere or to help them fill out a form. And then another thing that happened is a lot of people were getting code enforcement tickets. The senior citizens or disabled neighbors that have maybe got a ticket for not painting their house. And so then I would call the city saying, why are you doing this? Like, why don't you just let us know that they need their house painted and we'll try to help them paint it? Why do they have to get a ticket and go to court and do community service? And there's people like rolling down there in their wheelchairs with their oxygen tanks trying to explain to a judge why they didn't paint their house, and it just seemed kind of like strange to me. And then I found out that there's these city programs where they'll actually help the people paint their house, but first they have to be in the court system. But in order to qualify for that help, they have to have all this paperwork, and my neighbors often didn't have that paperwork. One day I was just really just frustrated with the system, and I was like, well, how hard is it to be a lawyer anyway? So I just Googled, and I ordered a LSAT study guide and I signed up to take the LSAT. I was like, I wonder if I could just go to law school, And so anyway, I had no idea how hard it was going to be. And it's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do. But it's also so much more interesting than I imagined. And I have the opportunity of going to UNT Dallas College of Law, which is right here downtown Dallas. It's a public law school. So it's not like your typical law school that maybe like $80,000 a year. It's more like $14,000 a year. So it's much more feasible for me to do. They have an evening program, so I can still do my job at Cornerstone Crossroads Academy and then go to class in the evenings and summers. And I'm just loving it so much. I just finished my first year. I have 3 years to go. So much more learning to do, but it's just very rewarding. And on the lines of teaching something so that you can learn it better, one of the things that I did last year, the staff let me have a Friday morning session with the kids where I called it the craziest thing I heard all week. And so I would read them one of the crazy cases that we were reading for class, and I would tell them, what the rule of law was, the facts of the case, and then let them predict what they thought the outcome was in that case. And one thing about our students is they were phenomenal at guessing the outcomes and all the different ins and outs of it, like so much more than I was. And this was like in civil cases, not necessarily anything that they had ever heard of before. And so that really helped me learn and be more prepared for classes and just helped me enjoy it to make the connections between what I was learning in class and the real world. And it was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, that is got to be one of the coolest things I've heard in a long time. Man, that's so special. But that offers a great kind of entry point. So when you got started, let's take a step back. When you got started at CCA, what was your role like? What were the first round of students like, and how has that changed? I mean, we're talking 15 years.
Yeah.
What? Explain the timeline for us.
Well, when I met the Beckett's, they were funding everything, and they were essentially the board of directors with Pastor Chris Simmons, the pastor of Cornerstone Baptist Church.
So
And
there were three
so,
board of directors.
yes,
Got it.
and even though it was a public nonprofit, since it was completely funded through their family foundation, there weren't a lot of the same things that you might see in a public nonprofit that has, funding coming in from multiple sources and things like that. So we had a very, I would say, extremely streamlined budget. And there were 3 teachers, but we were all kind of part-time. So I was principal slash teacher. And so we would try to hire teachers who could work part-time, but also we couldn't really compete with like the public schools or even Christian schools salaries. So it was tough. And there were times when there were years when I was the only full-time employee, and we had a team of part-time teachers that were maybe seminary students or um, in different situations where they could just work part-time. But those were some pretty tough years because it was hard to build consistency with the students and really have a predictable school culture, because even the staff weren't there at the same time, so they barely knew each other, and it was just a lot of turnaround for the kids. So those first few years were pretty tough. I taught subjects that I didn't know I could teach, but God would always bring the resources. I remember one particular day when I was trying to teach chemistry, and I can do like stats and that kind of math, but I've never been good at like chemistry or anything like that. And I was trying to explain something to the students, and I remember feeling those hot tears in the back of my eyes because I was like,
No.
the kids are about to figure out that I do not know what I'm talking about, and I don't know how to get out of the middle of this lesson.
The worst.
I was at the board. They were all sitting around watching me try to explain something that I didn't even understand very well myself. And the door opened, and this girl named Jordan walked in, and she was like, "Hey, I am a student at SMU, and I'm a chemistry major, and my professor said you guys might need some tutors." And I just remember feeling like, is she for real? Is she like an angel or something from God? What is happening right now?
Wow.
And she just stepped up to the board and explained everything. And I was just, furiously taking notes because I was the most motivated learner in the room. But God
I
has just
bet.
consistently just met our needs at the right moment with just the right resource or person over and over and over.
How has that expanded as the mission of the school has stayed the same, but the capacity and bandwidth has expanded? I mean, I guess just starting at the number of students and the amount of programs, how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, so right now, I'll start from where we are and kind of work backwards a little bit. But
Sure.
right now, we serve 25 students at a time that are approximately 17 through 25 years old. And so they're older teenagers and young adults who want a second chance to come back and complete high school. The great thing about older students is they've already kind of run toward the edge, fallen over the edge, hit their head, and gotten some sense sometimes. Um, Sometimes working with middle schoolers or younger high school students, it seems like you're just like standing on the edge, trying to flag them down and tell them not to go over the edge. But there's actually some benefit in working with kids that have already tried to do things their own way or tried different, try to make it without a high school diploma even, and realized this is really something I need, because then they want to take the steps to get that and they can see the value in it. You may have to remind them of that on some days when they're not feeling it, but they know that there is value in being there and getting that high school diploma. But over the years, we've tried different numbers. When I first got there, they were serving about 12 students at a time because they wanted to really preserve that family-like atmosphere. But if even just 2 or 3 students were out for the day, it was hard to get that classroom feel or just get that energy that you get in a room full of kids that are curious and learning and motivated and kind of feeding off of each other. And so we just gradually eliminated more and more things in the building until we eventually got to almost like one big open room. And then technology changes were helpful because we didn't have to have the big giant desktop and monitors and all that. So as we switched to laptops, that opened up more room for students. And then we had a big server that was sitting on the floor, and we realized, well, that's about taking up the size of a student. So we hung that from the ceiling. So we had room for one more student there. And we just kept trying to streamline the space so that we could fit as many students as possible in at a time. So over the years, we tried serving students that were 15 through 21 or 22, and that was not as successful as working with the older students. And part of that is because the younger kids really need those extracurriculars. They need the clubs and sports and other things to get involved in. When finishing high school isn't motivating enough, sometimes just staying eligible to play on a team or staying eligible for something else they care about kind of holds their little feet to the fire. But For us at this stage of the game, it's better for us to just focus on the ones that really need that last chance to finish high school.
You're talking about individuals who have tried it their own way, failed, and you've talked about how, as a school, you've really had to niche down and figure out who the ideal avatar was for the students, but also the staff. What's missing in the typical education that Cornerstone is really able to target for the individual students because you're able to focus more on the right individual?
So that's a kind of a multi answer that has to do with both the staff and the students. So on the student side, us acknowledging that our students are major overcomers. I would line up any individual student that has ever been at CCA next to any adult in the suburbs and let them compare what life experiences they've had to date. And most kids by the age of 17 have had life experiences that a 70-year-old will never have. And that just gives me so much respect for our students who are overcoming things. Like some things they might have made some choices or taken some steps to go in the wrong direction, but a lot of times it's stuff that they were they're just in this set of circumstances often that has nothing to do with their choices. They're just trying to figure out how to navigate forward. And so a lot of our students have, before they come to us, they've already been homeless for seasons of their life. They've maybe missed years of schooling early on during elementary or middle school. Some students will come to us at the age of 19 who haven't really been in school since they were in the second or third grade because whoever they were living with was moving from place to place, or they were just in foster care and being moved home to home. And so they might have gone to school, but not like completed a whole school year at any one place. So there's just a lot of mobility, a lot of just family challenges, and a lot of things that are affected by poverty, like just health issues, access to health care, access to food, having a bed to sleep in every night, having the water turned on, just some of the things that you don't really think about as barriers to getting a high school diploma are things that can deeply impact our students' ability to focus and learn during the school day when they're not sure like where they're going to go that night or what the situation is going to be. And then some of our students have been victims of violence. Almost every year we have students who have limited mobility in an arm or a leg or something, or because they still have like a bullet in them from getting shot before, or just lots of scars from things that they've been through emotionally and physically. And so our students are major overcomers. And I think us entering the space, acknowledging that and respecting that really sets a certain kind of tone for them to come in and know, hey, I'm building on all of this other good work that I've already done just to be here today. And then for our staff, I think one of the most crucial things that we can offer that as a public school person, I longed to do, but it was just impossible to do because of the sheer numbers, is really one-on-one and small individualized assistance and focus, not just for individuals, but also like to build a small community of support. And so students do have an individualized plan, and teachers do know them on an individual level, but it's brought into CCA in more like in the culture of a family. And so the kids call and check on each other, and the kids notice when someone is missing, and they'll be texting someone saying, hey, where are you? Are you coming today? Before the staff is even doing, attendance checks. And so that's really what makes all the difference, is just knowing that you belong and that someone's going to miss you if you're not there. Someone cares about you. That really has a lot to do with our theory of change. And so there's a book called Change or Die. And one of my favorite role models, I guess, is this lady named Mimi Rogers. And she runs a program out in San Francisco. And the theory there is there's kind of three phases of change. And the first phase is connecting with someone who cares about you and maybe they even care about you more than you care about yourself, but you just connect with somebody and you can feel so strongly that they really have your best interest at heart that you'll kind of take the next step and kind of comply with things they ask you to do, even if you don't really see the benefit of it. But it's like, I don't really care about this. I don't really want to do it, but this person cares so much about me and they think it's important, so I'm going to do it for them. And then the next phase is feeling the positive experiences from those changes and doing those things and seeing that this can really be beneficial to me, so that after a while you're doing it because you can see the benefit in it. And so even if that relationship is not there, or even if the relationship changes a little bit, you're still continuing to do those changes because now you're like, oh, I actually like life better this way. And so I really believe that's true. I think for most teachers or educators, they think the initial step is like the people just need to learn more, like learn the dangers or learn why you shouldn't do this or the benefits of doing it. But I really don't think it starts in the head. I think it starts in the heart. And so for me, the relationship is a starting place. Having the right staff, having the right leadership, having the right campus culture is everything in meeting the needs of our students. And so to that end, about 5 years ago, I realized I might enjoy being the principal and I might feel good about it and feel confident in it. And I definitely had plenty of training in it and experience. But what our kids really need is a person of color to be the leader. And I specifically prayed for God to bring a young African American man to be our principal, because we had so many young men who didn't know any other men in their lives, who were married to the parent of their children, or who have maybe gone to college or worked in a professional setting or was a member of a church, or some of the things that, just we maybe take for granted in other settings. Like our students just didn't see a lot of that in the men around them. And so some of them did, without a doubt. We have some who have specifically grandpas, and even some of them who have fathers who are those strong male role models. But for the most part, they did not. And so we prayed, and God just led us to Wayne Sims, who's our principal now. And so 5 years ago, he came on board as our principal, and he brought on several other men of color to really lead the staff and set that tone, set that culture at the school. The kids see them laughing and talking to each other, but also holding it down professionally every day, coming to school prepared, being there on time, being consistent regardless of how they're feeling. And so it just sets a certain kind of tone for our kids to come in and know what to expect, and to build those relationships with our staff.
Wow. And you're right. That was a multifaceted answer that I don't even know where to start in trying to unpack that. Thank you so much. There's a lot of value there. I guess when you had to, taking it back to your development and your growth, you talked about how you felt as the principal, but then you saw the need to replace yourself in order to move out of that role. And I've used the phrase delegate to elevate. Do you feel like you were able to elevate your output and what you were able to do for the students by taking yourself out of the role? You've already said that you saw the value from the students looking upward. What did that do for the organization as a whole?
Well, I would say that's one of my more difficult transitions professionally, because I had, in an unhealthy way, identified myself so much in my role at
Wow.
CCA that for a while I felt like I almost didn't know who I was. Um,
Wow.
is like nobody even knows what an executive director is, hardly. And so the kids would be like, Miss, how come you don't work here anymore? And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I work harder than I ever have here. You just don't see what I'm doing. But
Right,
also, like,
right.
I didn't really become an educator to do like fundraising and finances and payroll and audits and just all the stuff that really must be done in an organization to be healthy. I feel like my love for CCA and my love for our students in this community had to exceed what I personally enjoyed doing every day. So instead of doing what I loved, I kind of found a way to love what I do. At first, kind of maybe begrudgingly, but now lovingly embraced my role as an ED. And I also feel like it's kind of for a season. Like this is what we need for me to do right now. But someday maybe I'll play a little different role at CCA. But for right now, this is my best way to serve our students and our staff and my community is by being in this role. So I feel like I'm a lot healthier now and that we're healthier as an organization because I want us to be at a place where when I get to 20 years at CCA, we could hire an ED and they could step in and take it to the next level and I can work under them or work, in alongside them or something. But I think that I'll be able to release it more as we've grown and put systems in place and really built out the org chart instead of having things kind of revolve around one person.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're definitely not alone. I know I can speak for myself and others in the business community that they identify with their business and their role in the business, and they end up becoming the bottleneck, and they're not able to scale because they do everything. And it's the sense of, okay, I need to replace myself in these categories, but once I do, if I haven't done the work to autocorrect my identity, and you feel lost. And that exact same thing, how you described it. Hey, man, you don't care about us anymore. Hey, where you at? You don't show up. You just, and I get that all the time to this day. And I'm a little better with it now. But yeah, it can be in a dark place if if you don't have a strong foundation in yourself, in the Lord. I'm curious well, you already answered hiring another ED at some point, but I'm curious, as the ED now, do you find that there are roles or tasks that you can delegate out? Have you started to do that? Where are you on that journey of replacing yourself so you can oversee the entire process?
Yeah, the Lord really brought kind of a organizational thinker to our board a few years ago, Carla Moss, and she really helped me think about roles and responsibilities in our org chart. And I think one of the hard things is like a lot of the things that I needed to delegate were the things that I enjoyed doing the most. And so it was hard to let them go because it kind of felt like that's what made sense in defining a role, like a job description for another person, is to group these certain things together and hire someone to do that. But I just didn't want to stop doing it. So I was reluctant, but over time I could see how it really made sense. And even just thinking about growth, you can't just bring people in to do all the jobs that you don't want to do. You actually need to make their life make sense too. And
Yeah.
so we've grown people, like our director of operations, Sydney. She started as a volunteer, and then she came on part time, and then she came on full time. And then over time, I realized like she really can see how everything works together. She's like a brainiac when it comes to organizational efficiency and just systems thinking. Um, there was somebody else who had been on the team who was kind of like we just did everything together, and so but there weren't like clear lines on who's doing what. We just kind of did everything together and got like 3 times as much done, which was awesome. But when she left, it was a very challenging period of time. But then Sydney came in and started growing and more. So the Lord blessed me beyond measure this year when Brandy came back to join our staff again after having been gone for a while. And so now Brandy, Sydney, and I really do have more clarity in our roles, but also I think I'm a healthier leader because I'm not as codependent with my coworkers or the team. And also, I think they enjoy working there more too because there's just like a little bit more clarity on who's doing what most of the time. We're still figuring out some of it, but
Yeah.
I think that really helps us be more dynamic and get things done more efficiently. And not that efficiency is necessarily the goal. Like efficiency can be the enemy of effectiveness, right? Especially when it comes to relationships. If you just turn everything into a system or a task, then you miss out on some of those meaningful but messy interactions. But as a nonprofit person, thinking about how we can use the dollars that people give and the way God provides in the best way possible, we do need to try to be efficient, because if we're wasting a whole lot of time doing stuff and not able to do the most important things because we just don't want to think in systems and we just want to do what we like, then we're not using resources wisely. So it's kind of a balance between thinking efficiently and the relational side.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's just so interesting how running a business, running a church, running a school, they can all be tied back to these basic principles. And if you follow them, just listening to you talk with your role and how that's evolved, and then bringing in Sydney and then Brandy, it just makes me think of, and I reference this a lot, but the book Traction and EOS, where you have a visionary and then an integrator. And when I read that book, it opened my eyes, realizing that I was a person can sit in both seats, but you can't have two people sitting in one of the seats. You need somebody that's really accountable for the role, because if two people are accountable, nobody really is. And, working with my dad, and I used to work with my wife, and now that we're building out the leadership team, and without having those like tough conversations and clarity moments and same page meetings and all of those things, man, I was really alienating a lot of people that were with me and under me without even realizing it. And I was trying to be nice and maintain a relationship, but I really wasn't able to lead well because we didn't have that clarity. But it took me a long time to figure it out. Well, I appreciate you so much. We're coming up on a close, but I want to ask, what are you most excited about right now for Cornerstone Crossroads Academy, the community? What's popping?
And I am so excited to see the gym at the Phyllis Wheatley School be restored. When we first purchased property, we were thinking we're going to have to convert the gym into classrooms because we wouldn't be able to afford to restore the main building for a long time. And in the meantime, we had this urgent need for space for classrooms. And so the neighbors, kind of went along with our plan, but they're like, can you not figure out some kind of way to save the gym? Our kids need a safe place to play inside. There's just so many things we could do if you keep the gym a gym. We just really struggled with that decision for a while, and thank God we had COVID to slow everything down so we couldn't just run forward with our plans, because during that time several folks brought up the option of putting a portable on site. And so now we have a modular building, which we're getting ready to move into this summer. So we will have more space, almost double the space, but at the same time, we didn't have to change the gym into classrooms. So we're also getting the gym restored. So within the next 6 months, we'll have almost double our classroom space, plus we'll have about a 4,000 square foot gym and other space to use for community events. And I'm just excited about seeing people in the neighborhood and our students coming together joyfully, celebrating, having fun games, having meetings, solving problems, building relationships together in that space that was just sitting kind of abandoned for about 12 years. So that's bringing me a lot of joy. I go over almost every day and look at all the progress, and after a couple of years of fundraising to get to this point, it's super exciting to see work happening, and just imagine what's going to happen someday when we can restore the full main building, which is this gorgeous 2-story, 20,000 square feet of more space. It's going to be awesome. But for right now, the gym is waking me up at night with excitement.
Oh, that's amazing. Man, talk about putting in the work every single day, just one foot after the other, and then boom, just breakthrough. gosh, how exciting. I mean, once the school's complete, the building is complete and the school is able to fully transfer over, I mean, what type of capacity, what's the vision for the space?
Yeah, I think we'll be able to serve at least 200 people a month through
Wow,
our high school program, but
10x.
also through our job training programs, after school programs for the neighborhood kids that have been displaced by that school shutting down, which hopefully will be a preventative measure from kids needing a school like ours later on. And a way for us to really serve the kids that are in the public schools and the public schools themselves. We'll be able to have our restored community meetings there again, and talked to several hospitals about offering teledoc services there, technology training. Just it's really amazing all the potential there, especially when you consider the needs that are very evident. If you just drive through the neighborhood, you'll see that there are certain needs that should be addressed, and just the opportunity to come together as a community to meet those needs is just is just a huge, phenomenal dream coming true in everyday life.
Such a beautiful thing. And this just makes me think we definitely need to have a follow up because I want to dive deeper into more of the programs, more of the needs of the school, but also the community. And this whole podcast, the purpose is to just open people's mind in a variety of ways. And I think bringing somebody on like yourself, bringing on some students, it just paints a picture and opens up a world that people wouldn't have otherwise been able to see. So I appreciate you so much for getting this going for us. What would you leave as a final tip? Maybe something, just a piece of advice or something that a person that can take. Maybe they're from the business community, the church, maybe they are challenged and they're not able to really talk about race or socioeconomic differences, and coming from where you are and just thinking about somebody who's on the other side, or maybe just is foreign to what you do every day. What would you say to kind of open them up or to maybe bring them in closer to the South Dallas, the Phyllis Wheatley community?
Well, I would say the first thing is to listen and learn without trying to jump in and solve any problems or even identify problems. Just
Mm.
come alongside, and if you don't feel ready to come alongside, then read. Read, listen to podcasts, listen to different speakers talk about things. I pulled out some of my favorite books. One is by Francois Booker Drew called Empowering Charity, who would be an excellent person for you to interview on the podcast. Um, Bob Goff, everyone's favorite, Love Does, about just where to start. Howard Thurman, Jesus and the Disinherited, just kind of historically looking at some of the challenges that our Black and Brown brothers and sisters face. Always Martin Luther King, Letters from a Birmingham Jail, such a classic. The Accommodation, what kind of the history of South Dallas, The Color of Law, kind of the structural systems that have been a part of creating environments like what we have here today. But just listen and learn. And then I'm going to kind of turn it around back on you too, Matthew, because I think, you may not feel like you're an expert on what to do. And that's probably the best possible mindset to enter a space and serve. Not as an expert, but bringing your skills and talents and what you have and what you do and what you're learning to the table to serve. And so I just want to give you a shout out for serving on our board of directors, and just some of the things that you bring up about how we could be better communicators and how we could think about reaching a wider audience have been transformational for us. Like, it's probably like just a thought off the top of your head to you, but for us, since we're not in the entrepreneurial world, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like a lifeline of support and great ideas. And so we've acted on those And so I think, thinking if God is pulling at your heart to get involved in something, just think about what opportunities he's given you, what tools are in your hands, what educational background do you have, what are you passionate about, what do you know how to do? Are you great at Excel spreadsheets? Well, guess what? Nonprofits need help with data. Are you good at financial processes? Well, we need a treasurer on the board. There are all kinds of roles that are needed in the nonprofit world that you might not think about. But as you start to listen and learn and come alongside those nonprofits, oftentimes you'll see, oh, there's a little space here where I could bring what I do every day to the table and help them make light years worth of progress that they could never make without this team of board members or committee members or whatever kind of leadership team model they have kind of speaking into their daily lives. So thank you for your leadership in that. I've really strongly encouraged others to do the same. There's plenty of nonprofits to get involved in, and we really need your help.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I feel like sometimes all I have going for me are my my crazy ideas. Every once in a while, one of them's gonna hit. So I shoot them out there. I shoot my shot. But no, I appreciate that. I appreciate you. There's an old quote. Um, there's actually a lyric. I won't tell you the band because you won't respect the quote as much, or maybe you will. But he basically puts up a prayer and he said, Lord, set my eyes to serve and my hands to learn. And it's just such a humbling quote. And I resonate with it and I hold on to it. It's just, look for opportunities to be a servant, and as you do the work, learn. Be ready to learn. The work in and of itself is how we grow, how we build. Lord, keep my eyes to serve and my hands to learn. And with that, I'm gonna close this. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. The only thing I got left to say: stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace.
Man, there's so much value in that conversation. I'm so thankful for Miss Kristi for coming on and indulging my questions. I mean, I think that was great. I think a lot of people who listen to this will learn about not only what's going on in the inner city, but how you can get involved, how a person can grow in not only what they're outputting personally, but how they're building back into their community. Miss Kristi is an exceptional individual, and not all of us are going to have that level of passion, drive, ability. Back to EOS, the GWC gets it, wants it, and has the capacity to do it. And when you're talking about inner city work and giving back and anything philanthropic or community based, it takes a lot. It takes a lot out of you. It takes a special person who can strap up and go out there every single day and give back and pour out into others. But it doesn't have to start there. And I think that was a key factor, that there's a lot of need. You don't have to be super rich and have a bunch of money to donate. If you're good at Excel, if you know anything about bookkeeping or finances, if you have experience in marketing, in social media, if you have free time during your lunch, in my experience at Cornerstone Crossroads Academy, one of the biggest underdog volunteer setups, one of the things that we were looking for always, but it wasn't sexy. People weren't super excited about it because people just slept on this thing. But it was lunch volunteers, people who would come and just donate their time and bring food. So the people that are out on the ground, Miss Kristi, Brandy, Sydney, Mr. Sims, the principal, so they don't have to worry about, okay, how are we feeding these students today? Groups that came in and provided lunch on a regular basis were some of the biggest blessings. And over time, individuals that did it consistently, they eventually found ways to get more and more involved. There's a lot of people that are actually on the board now, the board of directors, that started as lunch volunteers. It's never too late to grow. I mean, you heard it. Miss Kristi was in the school district. She was a teacher. She was an administrator. She worked her way up to be a principal, then pivoted, and then it went into the inner city in a very different setup. But that didn't stop her. She was in that role for years, got deeper in the community, deeper involved with the people who are in the neighborhood, and realized, whoa, there's another need that I can fill here, and started going to law school. I mean, how cool is that? It's never too late to grow. It's never too late to adapt, to alter your identity. The thing that you identify with doesn't have to stay that thing forever. That's a decision that we make. And it's based off of what we're comfortable with, what we're predispositioned towards, but it doesn't have to stay the same. We can choose how we identify. And if I identify as a teacher, if I identify as a coach, but I don't identify as somebody that can go out there and actually get my hands, on the ground and build up that community. That's a decision. And I have so much respect for people that see the opportunity to better themselves and they make the decision to upgrade, to level up, to put in the work. At the end of the day, it's not the individual things that these people identify with. They're not limited. They see a bigger picture. They have a bigger vision, and they're not bound by the micro, the small window mindset. But that's good, because that takes me to my next takeaway. Be careful how you allow yourself to identify with any given role in your organization. So it's one thing to think about, okay, how can I give back? But let's take it back to what we're currently doing and where we're currently at in our organization. If I have a role as I'm the leader of this team, or I'm the best technician that we have, how about this? Nobody can sell better than me. Nobody can service our customers better than me. Eventually, you'll find as you scale your business, you're going to have to replace yourself, at least duplicate yourself. You might not be out of the game, but you at least got to duplicate yourself and put other people in place to do that thing. Well, then eventually, after you've done that, you're going to need somebody to run those people. Obviously, as the owner, it's only natural that you, okay, even though you're the best, you see a need to take a step back so you can manage your technicians. But then what happens when you scale a little bit more and you need a high level manager because your business has grown so much? There's other things that need your attention, and now managing getting in the way, or better yet, the other things that you are required to do are getting in the way of your managing, and you're not doing that good of a job anymore. So now you need to replace yourself fully as a manager. But when you do that, what if your identity was trapped in being that manager, in being that leader? And now you're not needed for those pop-up meetings in the morning anymore. The team doesn't call you when they need help. If your identity is tied into that role, that can be a dark place. It can feel very isolating and purposeless. I think we heard it, from Miss Kristi. It doesn't have to be a business setup. You don't have to be the owner of a business. You can be an educator. You could be a teacher. You could be a principal of a school that moves up and gets a promotion to be an executive director, or you could be in a nonprofit space. It doesn't matter what it is. Our identity, if we allow it to be tied to a specific role, we're missing something. We're missing something. We're not seeing the bigger picture. We have to be very careful. And lastly, I just want to say this. There's a lot of stuff going on in not just South Dallas, but in communities all over the country. There's a lot of good work happening and good people doing the good work. If we get too tied up in labels, in politics, in small window thinking, we can really miss out. If we get too caught up in ourselves and what we're doing and isolated and looking inward and not looking outward, we can really miss out on these big picture things that are happening around us. The Cornerstone Crossroads Academy is such a special place in my heart. And I started there on staff as a life coach, and then I came on full time. We had a work study program, leadership class. We were we had a basketball team, and that was just the stuff that I was directly involved in. There's so many programs and special things that school has. And so for that school to be able to acquire the Phyllis Wheatley building, which is an historic building in South Dallas, that has been abandoned for a really long time, to be able to restore that is such an amazing thing. I guarantee there's things like this going on in your community. All you have to do is look up, look out, not be so inward focused and self focused that you're missing bigger pieces that need people like you to plug into. So I hope there was value there. I appreciate you so much for listening all the way to the end. Just warms my heart to think there's people out there that actually find value in this. So if you like it, please share it, give us a 5-star review, and as always, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace.